All three readings today touch on the theme of really division, of prejudice, of distinctions, of categories. They kind of show us this reality of that we live in this world where we tend to think about in-groups and out-groups of people. And they reveal to us, though, that God's mercy, which is really His grace in operation, that God's mercy extends to every human being, that everyone is worthy of His love, that He pours out His love for all people. In the gospel reading in particular, it's kind of shocking to us because Jesus is reflecting that division between the Jews and the Gentiles, right? The Canaanite woman, in fact, is a member of a group that's considered the enemy of Israel, that He calls her a dog, and so that is very shocking to us about that reflection. I think it's helpful, though, to have a little bit of the context of where Jesus and His disciples have been and where they're going and why they're there, kind of to figure out, well, what's happening in this story. You may recall earlier in the Gospel of Matthew that Herod beheads John the Baptist, who is Jesus' cousin. And the disciples at that point go and they bury the body of John the Baptist. And when they return, they speak to Jesus. Matthew and Mark have the same sequence of events for these events here, but Mark goes into a little bit more about the location and the details, which is a little bit unusual. But Mark says at that point that Jesus tells His disciples, because they've already been busy about a lot of ministry and efforts and people, He says, you need to come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. And from there, they head towards Bethsaida, and they go to a deserted place, and then crowds follow them, right? And so Jesus teaches, and then He feeds 5,000. It's from there that He puts them on a boat and joins them in the watch of the night as they're being tossed by winds and waves, so they didn't get any sleep that night. And then they arrive on land across the Sea of Galilee at Gennesaret. A large crowd gathers there, and Jesus heals many diseases and illnesses. So they were already tired, and they've not had any rest, right? They haven't had any chance to do anything. Jesus and the disciples are going for the one and only time in all of the gospel readings outside of the Jewish territory. They are heading into truly Gentile territory. They're entering the Roman province of Syria to go to Tyre and Sidon, two trading cities. Tyre is about 35 miles from Gennesaret, and Sidon is about 50 miles from Gennesaret. So they're walking outside of the territory of Jerusalem, of Israel. And, you know, it is great, and I kind of celebrate this, that we are kind of, at St. Pat's, are kind of like Cheers, if you recall that show where everybody knows your name, you know that you belong. But when you're trying to get some rest, sometimes it's beneficial to go somewhere where nobody knows your name, right? You kind of get out of the normal routines, get out of the normal sequence of things, the normal relationships and demands that you have, and you have an opportunity to rest. So it is possible that Jesus and His disciples are leaving Jewish territory to go where He's less well known, where they can actually get some rest from the throngs of people that have been following Jesus and seeking out His healing and His mercy and His forgiveness. Here at St. Pat's, I am your pastor, but I am blessed, and you are blessed, to have a wonderful staff, a pastoral team and school faculty and staff that are really partners in ministry. I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for their skill, their dedication, their passion, the hours that they put in, and their knowledge and competency, right? And they are wonderful to work alongside. In a particular way, I have three other people, and Father Kwan makes three other people that are our operations team. And so I have a model of leadership that is co-responsibility and shared leadership with them. And so they help to guide the direction of our parish staff and community, the ministry that we do. And I couldn't do what I do without them. And so that's Carrie Williamson and Dave Neighbor and Dr. Nathan Sturzel that are part of that team. They really are the leaders of our staff, and they help me in my leadership. So I don't abdicate any responsibility as pastor, but I exercise that through a model of shared leadership. And in July every year, we try to really slow things down a little bit. We still have a lot of events that happen, but we try to slow things down so that they can have time to be able to recharge, to take vacation, to be able to get out of that routine and be renewed. In particular, the week of July 4th, the last 2 years, we've kind of made it a sabbatical week that's very intentionally a very slow time for us here so that they can do that. That might be something like what Jesus and the disciples are doing, right? They're trying to get out of town to be able to rest a bit. And I, as you know, I do that too. So I like to go on vacation, and I love you all, but sometimes I've got to leave, right? And that is really so that when I come back, you get my best. You get my full effort, my full engagement, right? And so those times away are a time to return and to be fully present with you as your pastor. One of the times that I went on a vacation was very early in my priesthood. And I've told this story before, I think it was about 5 years ago, but you all remember my rule. If I haven't told a story in 3 years, I get to repeat it. So this happened, a family, husband and wife and their 2 adult children, had invited me to go on a 4-day vacation with them to Lake Tahoe. And so I was going to go out, and I went out with them, and they had this sort of curiosity, like, well, what is it like to travel with a priest? You all should know it's a blast. But there was kind of like, I don't usually wear clerics. I don't take them along with me when I go, and I'm not real forward about kind of announcing to everyone that I'm a Catholic priest. And so they were asking me, well, Father, what do you want us to call you? Do you want us to call you Father Jeff while we're on vacation? And I said, you can call me that if you want, whatever you're comfortable with, but it's also okay just to call me Jeff. And, one of my boundaries, though, is that I never am ambiguous when someone asks me, what do you do for a living? So I do know that there are some priests when they're on vacation and someone asks them, what do you do for a living? Their response is, I'm in sales. And so I don't do that. I said, well, actually, I'm a Catholic priest, which always leads into some kind of conversation, into some interaction that happens, either positive, sometimes negative, but it always has a response to that, right? And so they were just going to try to call me Jeff, and we were flying out, and we had to change planes in Reno, and it got delayed, very much delayed. And so we were stuck in Reno, and we didn't get into Lake Tahoe until about 3 a.m. when we finally got to the hotel. So we just agreed we would take an easy morning the next morning, kind of get up whenever you got up. We might go down to a restaurant if we woke up, but reconnect at some point. So I woke up, and I was trying to call their room, and there was no answer. So I thought, well, they said they might go down to breakfast. I'll go and check it out. So in the hotel, it was one of those big complexes with a casino and a hotel and lots of restaurants that were there. And so I was going from restaurant to try to see if I could find them. You all have gathered this was before cell phones. Going from restaurant to restaurant, and over the loudspeaker in the entire complex, the main intercom in every public space, comes the announcement, will Father Jeff Schooner please come to the front desk? And I thought, so much for anonymity. Right? And so I went down the escalator in the lobby and was going around to the front desk, and a hotel employee stops me and says, sir, you can't come this way. And I was like, they just announced me I'm Father Jeff Schooner. He said, oh, you're the priest, come on over. And as I walk around the corner, there's EMS working on a man who was dead on the floor. And my friends had been in line with the concierge to get some recommendations, and the couple in front of them, the husband, had a heart attack. So my friends stepped in and gave CPR to him until the EMS arrived. And just about the time that I got there, they had gotten him breathing again. So he was alive. So I went over and talked to his wife, and then I said, I don't have any oil. I can't anoint him right now, but we'll pray together. So we prayed together. We got him on the ambulance and on the way to the hospital. And the hotel manager comes up to me and said, thank you, Father. Is there anything that we can do for you? And I said, well, I could use some oil. And they said, motor oil? Like, no. Massage oil, we have a massage parlor. No, I need some olive oil. So I think they got me a little container of olive oil from the Hard Rock Cafe. In an emergency, we can bless that and use that to anoint. And so I had that, and then I said, I also need a ride to the hospital. So the first time in my life that my ride to the hospital was a stretch limo with a full stocked bar in the back. And so I get to the hospital, I'm carrying my oil in, I go to the emergency room. They are prepping him for a stat flight up to Reno, to the medical complex up there. So I don't have a real chance in the emergency room. I'm following them as they're wheeling him up to the roof, and that's when I'm anointing him as they're getting ready to put him on the helicopter to take him to Reno. He goes to Reno. Thankfully, after about 6 weeks, his family flies out from West Virginia. After about 6 weeks, he recovers and is able to go home. The friends of mine stay in contact with him for a number of years, he and his wife, for a number of years following that. Why did I go to Lake Tahoe? It wasn't really to get away. It wasn't really vacation. God had a purpose and a plan. He had an appointment for me to keep, to allow that man to experience God's mercy in the midst of his troubles and trials. Why did Jesus and his disciples go into Gentile territory for the one and only time in all of Scriptures? It wasn't just to get away, right? The only interaction that is recorded from that trip in any of the Scriptures, so the only time they go outside of Jewish territory and the only interaction that is there in the Scriptures is the Canaanite woman. They went to keep an appointment so that God's mercy and his grace could be shown to go outside of our normal divisions, boundaries, categorizations, and prejudices. That God's grace extends to every human person, that his love extends to every human person, and his salvation extends to every human person that responds in faith. Right? That God is there to bring that message of salvation. That love extends through time and space to here and now. God has made an appointment to be in our midst, to show up in our lives, to encounter us in the midst of this Eucharist. We are invited into that meeting with God here and now. God has shown up. He has come to be with you and to be with me. And our response should be the same as the woman, the Canaanite woman, which is the response of faith, the response of persistence, of seeking after Jesus, of being ready to receive what he has to give. May our hearts be open to that grace that comes to us specifically for you and for me, and may we respond with that faith.